You are now rocking with the best, back again with another 9.9 episode. Welcome to Heroes After Dark, where we discuss life, love, and the pursuit of that comic grail. Before we begin, we have to thank you for joining us. Please, just acknowledge us. Hit that button like you're launching Cerebro. And of course, you got to subscribe like it's the Daily Bugle. Up tonight, we've got something different. We're stirring it up because there's a lot of controversy in the comic community, something that it's bigger than acetate. It goes even further than that. We're talking about who had first. And I don't mean that first. We mean who was the first in that book, who had the first appearance. So the heroes are assembled, and we're going to discuss this. We're going to go through some Silver Age, we're going to go through some Bronze, and who knows where else we may go, because this is just happened in comics through the years. So let's begin, gentlemen. Welcome, heroes. Good to see you all.
You salute.
What up?
Let's get into this controversy. We got to talk.
Right.
Go ahead.
You know what? Everybody right now is having X-Men fever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is. There's specifically, I could think off the top of my head 4 books everybody's chasing right now. I don't want to mention some of them to not spoil anything, but one that everybody's been chasing for the last couple of months is back, I would say, in everybody's radar is X-Men 266. As most people would identify it as the first appearance of Gambit. Now, on the left side of the screen right now, you're looking at X-Men Annual number 14. So, the debate, which is the official first appearance of Gambit? Let's take a look at some information first, right? So, looking at X-Men Annual number 14, it was released back in May 1990. Gambit does appear in the book, multiple pages, identified by name. As you can see here, we have this in the panel. He is clearly gives his name out, calls himself Gambit. This is the first time you see him inside the story. Here's another panel. He's actually hanging out with the X-Men, the X Factor, and he's just having a good old time, right? Damn near an official member at this point, I guess. So that's the information on that particular issue. I'm not sure if you guys agree or disagree on this being the first appearance or not. Let's take a look at X-Men 266 for comparison. This book came out in August of 1990. He is on the cover. He's obviously inside the book as well. We actually get to see him using his powers inside the comic as well. So this is the Gambit that we all know and love. There's heavy focus on him in this particular issue, but that does not take away from the fact that this issue did come out after Annual 14. Were you out there in the shops picking up your comics, you would not have gotten this book first. So, who thinks Annual 14 is the first appearance? And if you have by raise of hands, I guess.
Me.
No argument. There's no argument here.
No, there is no argument. I mean, the Mankini 266 is not the first.
So, one question then for the X-Men fans out here, right? And so let me go first to Daddy's issues, right? Because I know you've been in the game for a long, long time steadily. So when this issue first came out, or back then when this all started, if you can think back, where did you land on the argument? Did you always consider 14 to be the official and 266 the second, or did your mind change somewhere along the way?
I think that 266 was always the more collectible of the two, because annuals are always like the subspecies of the comic, right? So you've got your 12 issues a year, and then you've got your annual. And I just think people view the annual as sort of superfluous. Usually they were just added sort of one-off stories with a little mild tie-in. I think this one was because there was a delay. I believe they wanted to publish the 266 first, and that's why the cover still looks like some of the panels from the annual, only colorized, like that cover. And I think you've got a collectible looking cover. He's on the cover. An annual, which should have followed that issue, does not have a greatest cover, even though he truly is in the story. So I think up until recently, I can't say recently, but I would say that nobody was getting the annual. Nobody. The annual was a $10 book, $15 book forever. As sort of a side note, this was the first appearance through shipping issues, but you should really collect issue 266. And so I don't think people really gravitated towards it until people got a little more literal and said, wait a second, there's like a full story in the annual that came out earlier than that, intention or no intention. I think if annual 14 had a banging cover with him on it, then I think the collectability would change. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
So
a good point.
Yeah, because you can get the annual for raw for around $50-$60 raw right now. If you try to get the 266 up, I mean, you're paying $100 plus
Yeah.
almost
Even
for a decent looking.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy. I mean,
Newsstand even more.
and then we look at if you go to like a grading company like CGC and what they have it listed as, in cameo or first appearance, everyone kind of leans towards that 266 as being the first appearance of Gambit.
It's technically his first appearance in continuity. If even though the story, the X-Men annual happened, but I guess if you're kind of thinking of a story of him in that storyline, I would say 266 kind of stands out as, okay, he's in it and he's in continuity. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The annuals are typically standalones, right? Just like Daddy's Issue said. That's the annual. There's a story that happens in the annual that may not really be part of the main plot storyline of any run, right? It's like, oh, this one standalone, but then the writers will come back to it maybe like next season or next year or something like that. Like it'll touch on something or it may wrap up something that happened in the main story. So you just kind of get the annual, and most people, and even today, you get an annual like, oh, okay, you get it just as a completionist, but typically the annual doesn't really do anything for the main story overall. It may put a bow on it, it may tie it up, but it doesn't add or take away if you don't get it. But you look at 266, it's Gambit. 267 kind of followed the story, kind of kept it going, whereas first in continuity, first in story. So still a first.
If we're just looking at the purity and just, foundational principle, I mean, multiple panels, identified by name, regardless of, continuity, whatever the case may be, and even cover, it has to be the annual. And I get it, between CGC and continuous, outlets reporting 266. And of course, you have some outlets that report annual. I just don't see where there's no way we can continue to tell this lie. This is a lie, folks. This is a lie, ladies and gentlemen.
Agreed. They hoodwinked you because Daddy's Issues. Here's my argument. Spider-Man Annual 1, first appearance of the Sinister Six. If we're applying this logic of, well, it's not really in continuity, well, then when did the Sinister Six first appear then?
Well, not that it's not in continuity. I said it was a one-shot story. It was a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
So, notice if they tell the Sinister Six story in Annual 1, they didn't then jump in Spider-Man 13, continuing that story. It was a one-off. Mm-hmm. And so it allowed the writers to sort of tell whatever they want to do or introduce a character, almost like a test, and then bring those characters in the fold later on. They could refer back to the annual, but it wasn't like the annual then continued on until, I don't even think sometimes they would do annual to annual, but usually the annuals just stand off, and usually 2 or 3 stories. It wasn't just one story.
Mm-hmm. So then we can agree that the annual is the first appearance of Gambit, not 266.
I mean, that's my vote. I voted for that. That's always been my vote, actually. I was less vocal about it back then because everybody was, on 266, and I didn't want to come off as an idiot. But from the moment I picked up that book and I read it, I was like, oh, look, it's Gambit. I mean, there's no question about who I'm looking at. And,
right.
You know what I'm saying? He's got the suit. You actually see him do what he does, and people, there's no question about it, Well,
I have a question for all you guys, real quick. So why do you guys think that the more desirable book is the 266 as far as pricing, what you see in the market? Are you putting an annual 14 on the wall? Or are you putting the 266 on the wall?
I'm putting both of them.
And then what are you saying when you talk to people?
I think it's to Mike's point, continuity, right? If we're collecting X-Men and we're being very, very anal about our collection, annual just doesn't fit that continuity. But reality is the true first appearance is there in annual 14. The 266, regardless of shipping issues or whatever the case may be, it's about continuity. It's truly about the continuity. And I see why everybody is blowing it up to what it is and encouraging people to make that investment. So the real question is, when is CGC gonna go ahead and let us send our annuals back and you give us the proper label? You hear me, CGC? Give us the proper label.
Send that letter.
Annual 14.
Write a letter, Brad. Write a letter.
The first. No, they see this.
They vote. They actually do vote on this.
This is the first cameo appearance.
Yeah.
Right.
It should say
appearance.
It should say brief appearance. If they want first brief appearance, if you want to do, not cameo. Cameo is one panel.
One panel is a cameo. But I mean, this continuity argument, I mean, we can apply the same thing to Harley Quinn, Batman High Adventures. You could say, well, that's not, I mean, that book is a $2,000 book, and that's not continuity.
Now, but when
it's not.
When Supernova says continuity, you should really say it's just main title versus annual. It's in continuity. That annual is in continuity. It's not a Elseworld story. Yes. It is in continuity. It's just not.
Can you hear me?
Title.
Main title.
So that's like Giant Size X-Men and X-Men 94. They're both within the same storyline, but they're just one is, they're different in the sense that one is main title. And Forever, X-Men 94 was the one that people wanted. Giant Size was not the one that people wanted because they wanted the run of main title numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when we look at the values of the book between 94 and Giant Size, which one is the more expensive book?
Now
Significant.
Giant Size.
Now Giant Size, before 94.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going back just to 2005. The prices were similar.
Yeah.
So is this then indicative of we've been hoodwinked by the grading company saying that this is what it is? Because Overstreet didn't even recognize there's certain first appearances that Overstreet said this is the first appearance, and then now
same with Wizard.
Correct.
Yeah, old Wizard magazines from the '90s, they'll say 266 first appearance of Gambit.
The Overstreet sometimes does correct itself.
Mm-hmm.
Wizard's dead, so they can't correct themselves.
Yeah, that's out of the game.
But CGC is probably have an easier time getting Overstreet to correct it than you would CGC.
Yeah,
and is that because people thought they made an intelligent investment? And not saying it's a wrong investment, but people just want to make sure that they keep up on that investment. Another question I have for everybody: what do you personally define as a first appearance versus a first cameo?
The definition of cameo specifically says an appearance, a brief appearance. So technically a cameo should be an appearance.
Hulk 180.
Hulk 180, Hulk 181.
He appeared. It was a cameo. He was still there in the pages. So that should be his first appearance. Whether he talked, whether they said, hey, I'm Wolverine, whatever. He was still there, and that was an appearance.
It's like ASM 299 and 300.
Yeah. I mean, McFarlane says Venom's first appearance is 299.
That's the old trading cards.
Yeah.
The old trading cards said 299 for Venom's first appearance.
They also said 180 for, not that we're talking about that issue, but they said 180. But if you look at the trading cards, they'll put Gambit. They won't put X-Men Annual. I think they do actually put 266 because those were linked to the shipping.
It came first.
Correct. Okay. So the reason why we consider it to be the first appearance is just simply because that's the time that we got it in our hands. We were able to find it first, read it first. So therefore, to us, it is the first appearance. Yeah. Yes, it's a shipping error, but
I mean,
the story in the annual takes place first.
Yes.
As a kid, though, I didn't always buy annuals. I think I bought the X-Men and then later on got the annual and said, wait a second. And then
Hold
you
up.
got to go back and say, okay, wait, which case, you have to figure it out. So I wouldn't even have read the annual. I would have read 266 first, because I only had an allowance of so much money,
Yeah, annuals were much more expensive anyway.
Yep.
Than the standalone books, so it was
And
a
those
price thing.
square bounds, I think they were like $1, right? I think they were like double the price.
Mhm.
Yep.
But the annuals again didn't, just like you're saying, Daddy's issues, that when you buy the monthly books, you bought it because you knew next month the story would continue or it would keep going. So that's why you never picked up the annual, because
Right.
it was like, well, I'm gonna spend $1 on a book that doesn't really tie into anything. Then I'm just gonna stay with the main story. And to you guys, I'm gonna add one more to you. Then, if we're talking X-Men in 266, Gambit's other half. Gambit's other half, her first appearance was in what? An annual.
Rogue.
It was. Yeah,
Right.
Rogue.
The ugliest annual of all time.
Avengers annual.
That
Yeah.
cheeky looking annual.
Yeah.
Mm.
But her first appearance in main story, as Daddy's issue says, was later on in that run. So we still count the annual as her first appearance.
Yeah.
Now I wonder if the reason for that though is because it actually shipped as scheduled, right? Therefore, the intention was this is the first. There's no question about it. Where with this one, the question is, well, technically, had everything gone as planned, 266 would be the first. So there's an argument for the other side of the,
the other
for
way.
those that, for those that argue the 266, which none of them are here. So if you disagree with us, I mean, you feel
Jump
free
in
to
those
put it in the
comments.
comment section. You know what I'm saying?
Please
as
tell
far as
us
we're
why.
concerned, as far as
Yeah,
we're
I think
concerned,
if
I think we all agree, right? Annual
Yeah.
14, or did we change did we change our tune throughout the conversation now?
No, 14.
Annual.
I think if the
14.
annual had shipped to when it was supposed to, there would be no doubt that the annual was the first appearance.
I
Do
think
you
it's
think
that.
No,
the
no, the
annual
other
in
way.
the future?
No, backwards.
Other way around.
It was
266.
266.
Yeah.
Backwards. Yeah.
Do
So-
you guys think that annual will ever reach the heights as a 266 as far as desirable heights?
I-
Yes,
I
I'll
do.
tell you. The only time that will happen is going to be this, when the 266 becomes way out of price. It just price too out of range, and then people are going to go after the next most affordable option.
Mhm.
So not because people's minds have changed, it's just it's too expensive to reach. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, that's
Do you
$299 versus $300. That's what you started to see, where the price of $299 went up when people couldn't afford a 9.8 for 300 is what, about 4,000?
Yeah.
You get the
Do you
299
think a 266 would ever hit that status though? Would hit a 181 status? I don't think it would, because it's we're not talking about Wolverine or Venom here. We're talking about Gambit.
We're not.
Who's, I mean, he's
I mean, I'm gonna say this, and I know we hate it, but if Gambit is slam dunked in the films and he's super badass in the films, and he's gaining a bunch of casual viewers to Marvel, and all the Gambit fans come out of the woodworks even more, then there could be a possibility where that book for a brief time reaches a high where you're like, really? It could happen.
Yeah, he could. I mean, Gambit could have his own movie.
Yeah.
He can
I
hold
mean,
the movie. He can
I think
hold
he's
it.
strong enough that people like his backstory and everything. They could do it. He actually is.
Especially if it's
But I
with
don't.
the-
Would he hit like Wolverine status? No.
Nah, he won't be part of the zeitgeist, but I mean, he'll be beloved for sure.
Who's the character that might play him? Shot? Is it Tatum or something like that? What's his name?
no
Yeah.
Taylor Swift should play Gambit.
I'm only here for Taylor Swift.
All right, you know
I'll
what?
rush out and get a 266.
We're going to use that as a segue, man. So let's
There you
move on to another one. We're going to move on to something a little bit older. This one was brought to us by Daddy's Issues. We are going to look at Tales to Astonish 27 versus Tales to Astonish 35. So here, let's take a look at issue 27 is the first appearance of Hank Pym, not in costume, in the story. Okay. As you can see, what happened with him is, he shrunk down to size. So while, yes, he's hanging out with ants and all of that, at no point in time does he identify as Ant-Man. He's not wearing his costume. He's not Ant-Man. He's just Hank Pym. I'm just going by the story, guys. All right. All right. Now, if we look at issue 35, he's not only on the cover is he wearing his costume, right? We also see him in costume inside the story. So clearly now we're looking at the return of I don't know why it says the return of, but we have Ant-Man in the storyline here. So very, very different. For me, it's it's a no-brainer. But Brian, what do you say, man? I mean, you brought this up to us. What are your thoughts?
All right. So Tales to Astonish, 1959 it starts. That's 1962 when that issue comes out. It's written as a standalone sci-fi story, right? There's no intent to bring Hank Pym back at that time. It is literally written as a sci-fi story. I think it was the Lieber brothers, so Stan Lee and then his brother, Larry. And I think it was Kirby art. And they wrote a sci-fi story. And then he doesn't appear again. There's no reference to him being Ant-Man, nothing. And then, you're talking, 8 issues later, he shows up. All of a sudden, it's Return of the Ant-Man, but it's really Return of Hank Pym. But now they've decided to make it more of a superhero. And they make it, they give him a costume and everything, and they jump. The only reappearance, technically, from that is Hank Pym and some of the ants. And they sort of I wouldn't say retcon, but they kind of build on the sci-fi story, and then they sort of, with the intent of it now being a ongoing. And so I feel like it's more of a semantics issue that they're always saying, oh yeah, 227 is, or Tales to Astonish 27 is the first appearance of Ant-Man, but no, it's not. It's Hank Pym as a standalone story. And 35, which is dramatically undervalued then, is technically the first Ant-Man. In the same way that Marvel Superheroes 13 is the first Carol Danvers, and if you look at Miss Marvel 1, that's really the first Miss Marvel. And they definitely designate that separation in it. And I think that you'll see people just sort of saying, no, 27 is the first appearance. And I just think it's actually incorrect to say that, because there's a numerical gap, an intent gap, the cover gap, everything is different.
What do you guys think? I mean, where do you stand? Do you guys think 27 is the first full appearance of Hank Pym as Ant-Man, or just simply Hank Pym?
This is a little bit more trickier conversation than Gambit, because Gambit is Gambit. When we're talking Hank Pym, the individual who is Ant-Man, but he's not Ant-Man in the story, versus him being Ant-Man in the story, it makes the conversation a little bit more complicated. If Hank Pym is Ant-Man, then I mean, he's Ant-Man. He may not be Ant-Man then, but if he's Ant-Man and historically and continuously Ant-Man, he's Ant-Man.
I agree. I mean, if you look at the cover, go to Tales to Astonish. What's it say on what is it, 27? The man in the anthill.
Yeah, it's because he was in an actual anthill.
He's the man in the anthill. He's Ant-Man.
He's.
I wonder if when that came out, did they even have any intention of making him another character or doing anything with him at all besides this?
Well, like that is, as you said, it was a standalone. It was a standalone story, so it really
should have been just a one-off.
Yeah, that they were going to do, but then later on, a writer comes up and say, "Oh, we had this great idea back then. Let's bring it back," which they do that today, right? Yeah. They'll bring back characters from before. So I think, and I've seen that before, like Bobby Morris. Her first appearance was in, I can't think of the name of the book right now, but I know when I see it. But then later on, she becomes Mockingbird. So what's her true first appearance? Same thing here. Hank Pym's first appearance was 27, but Hank Pym Ant-Man's first appearance, I think, is 35.
Right. So when it comes to superhero, I'm sorry, and then Red, you can go next. What counts? Is it the individual, or is it the moment that you see the individual in the costume that we then identify as?
I think everybody's inconsistent, personally. I think if you go across the board, you can find examples of either or.
Correct.
People kind of pick and choose.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, because Hank Pym was Ant-Man, he was Giant Man, and he was Yellow Jacket. So you got a triple key. He has multiple heroes. But
I think you can go to DC and look at something very similar, which is Animal Man. Like, real deal, you're a DC guy, right? I don't know if you know Animal Man, but Animal Man basically showed up in 3 issues, which was each separated by about 5 or 6 issues apart, right? And each time it was like standalone until they finally the 3rd issues where he's in the Animal Man costume on the cover. This is Animal Man. Now he's going to have a continued story.
Mm-hmm. Out of those 2 books, what's more desirable as far as
the one in costume?
Okay,
because it's a better
which
cover.
makes sense.
So
He's on the cover, he's in costume, so you would go
similar to the 266 we just talked about.
So I just looked it up. Same can be said for Scott Lang, who's the second Ant-Man. Avengers 181 is the first appearance of Scott Lang. Marvel Premiere 47 is the first appearance of him as Ant-Man.
And which
So I
one do
think when it
people want?
comes to probably he's on the cover on Marvel previews as Ant-Man. So I would think that's it's the more valuable one, at least.
That's the more
I think when it
desirable,
comes
right?
to I think when it comes to the character and then their alter ego, if they become a hero, they should be separate. You know?
Yeah,
I think it comes down to cover. I think people choose the cover they like, and then they decide that's the one they want,
I agree.
and they make it happen.
Or whichever they have the most copies of.
Or what's
That's
worth
for
the
hype
most
guys.
money?
Well, majority rules in that case. The most money, the one that's going to carry the highest value is going to be the one that's most desired, right? That's just demand, supply and demand. The more demand the book has, the higher the value goes on that book. So 266 has the highest demand because, one, the cover is awesome compared to the other one. And then the same thing with Tales to Astonish. The second one is more, it looks better. So that's where more people lie. So I think that's where the demand goes, which is equal to value.
Now, production. Now, if you go to production numbers, you'll find that the annual, there's much less of the annual than there were of the main title. And there's a ton of the annual, which means there's even more of the 266. Whereas when you're talking about Tales to Astonish, there are way less 27s there are 35s.
I just see it like this. Hank Pym is Ant-Man. So what's really the true hang up there?
I'll give you a wrinkle. So before the Marvel Universe, it was the most affordable early Marvel key hero, right? So the book was just expensive because it was rare. And I don't think it separated itself out to the degree that it did until after the Marvel Universe took hold. Because I remember going through Overstreets and you would see 27 at $800 and the 35 at $600 because it was just a little bit less rare. Whereas if you looked at Spider-Man, he was, thousands of dollars compared to this first earlier book that was way less.
So I just looked on eBay. The 27 is significantly more expensive than the 35 by like thousands of dollars.
Absolutely.
And that's the first Hank Pym, correct?
Only Hank Pym. There's no Ant-Man at all in the book.
And then 35 says on the cover, the return of Ant-Man.
Correct.
But he wasn't
Should've
established
really-
as Ant-Man earlier.
There's no other Ant-Mans in between. So it's literally 27, nothing, 35.
And nowhere in 27 at all do they mention the words Ant-Man ever?
He's never called Ant-Man.
No, they just say
No.
the man with the ants. It's
Yeah.
it's an inference.
He's basically just a scientist who shrinks himself and has a brief story with some ants. I don't know how you go from that to the return of Ant-Man, but it's a bit confusing when you look at it. But I think what Daddy's Issue was saying is they looked at the book and they're like, you know what, we should make this guy into a hero. So it's the return of, right? It
And they
has
made him
a
a
better
costume,
title.
a backstory. That all that comes in 35. So 35 to me is really the true first appearance of the hero that you know. I don't think I have a problem with the label on 27. I have a problem with the label on 35. The 35 is the one that should say first appearance of Ant-Man, parentheses Hank Pym, who first appeared in 27.
So you're more of a classifier, more of a.
I think their classification of 35 is the wrong one.
see, 27 says first appearance of the Ant-Man, and then in parentheses it says Henry Pym not in costume.
Henry? Hey.
Why was that even needed? You know what I'm saying? That's like saying first appearance of Gwen Stacy not in Spider-Gwen costume.
So later on, those CGC labels will say other heroes will say first appearance of so and so, who later becomes, So why are they separating? Why are they reversing it on that one issue? That's always been my thing. Most of the time, they say the opposite. They'll say this person later becomes them in whatever issue.
That's like the girl who became Hollow's Eve. You said she appeared in the 90s?
Yeah, she's in some Spider-Man one-shot.
So,
And now they've changed their labels though, because I don't even think the original labels may have even put her there. Because she wasn't, it's like once she becomes significant, then they note your first appearance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Marvel Team Up 1 is the first appearance of what's her name from Heroes for Hire. I don't know if you guys know.
Misty? You talking about Misty?
Yeah, it's the first appearance of Misty Knight.
Yeah.
She's the girl that he rescues.
Mm-hmm. I had that issue.
And the labels, when they then went on and retconned and said, oh yeah, and Team Up 1, that girl you rescued, that was me. Then they started putting that on the labels.
Who thinks 27 is the first appearance of Hank Pym and Hank Pym alone?
Yeah, that's
okay. And who thinks 35 is the first appearance of Ant-Man?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. So I think we made our choice on that. So
I'm gonna go with 27.
Exactly. I'm with you on 27. Ant-Man.
27 is Ant-Man.
Hank Pym's Ant-Man. Man who is an ant.
Bradley is Black Supernova. Don't mix up my issues.
all right, so we don't agree on that one, but that's okay. That's why we have the conversations, right?
that wasn't us.
So there you go, guys. All right, so before we wrap it
Let's go.
up, because we got to get going and all that. Let's go right back and just clarify things, because I think sometimes as you have discussions, someone might influence your thoughts on things and change your mind. It's all good if you do. Who's chasing after the annual 14? I know
already have 'em.
I am.
We got them both.
Already got. Yeah,
I'm not chasing.
Yeah.
We know Daddy's issues.
If you
As a
guys
couple.
need those, you let me know.
Yeah.
I think I've hooked up several of you with those.
Yep.
I'll
Obviously,
take a
we're all
couple.
chasing 266 as well. I mean, let's be honest. If you have one, you
Yep.
won the other. I think.
Yeah.
To me, right? Okay. As far as the Ant-Man is concerned, I believe we have a split decision here, because I believe the Nilf Hunter believes that 25 is the first appearance of Hank Pym and Ant-Man at the same time.
I'm there for that.
This man does not believe in costumes. If you're in the,
I mean, you saw Gwen Stacy. She wasn't in costume.
I'm gonna edit this out.
Yeah.
So is Spider-Gwen's first appearance then in Spider-Man, first Gwen Stacy then essentially?
Technically, that would be the same logic applied.
No,
So that Edge of Spider-Verse book should be valueless.
Correct. Or it should be the second appearance.
That's
Well,
two different
no, because-
characters.
No, because Gwen
Correct.
Stacy's appeared
Two
all
different
along.
characters.
That's
Yeah.
two different characters.
It is.
Two
Different
different
reality,
characters, and they don't sell it as first appearance of Gwen. They sell it as first appearance of Gwen as Spider-Woman. So, kind of different, but
Boom.
all right,
Drop
cool.
the mic.
Hey, listen, this is an ongoing conversation, right? After this, we're gonna have it anyways. We're gonna probably revisit this conversation. You guys out there are probably having the same conversation about these books or whatever books it is that you are collecting, right? Either because you have money invested into one book versus the other, or because you genuinely believe that one book is the true first appearance versus the other, right? So get in the comments and let us know what you guys think. And on that note,